Casanova was not just a lover. He was a master manipulator of hearts, a master manipulator who hid behind silk and hair. Behind the charm lies control. Behind the romance lies power. This is not a love story, but a testament to the psychological warfare behind seduction. This book will reveal how desire turns into dependency and how intimacy turns into influence. If you're ready to see love not as an emotion, but as a strategy, turn the page. Let the game begin. Chapter 1. The Birth of a Seducer. Casanova's Origins and Mindset. More than charm, this is where manipulation began. Before the world knew him as a legendary seducer, Giacomo Casanova was a child of contradiction, born into instability, driven by curiosity, and raised in a world where illusion held more power than truth. He wasn't just a romantic adventurer. He was a product of psychological necessity. A boy who learned early that power lay not in force, but in perception. This chapter delves into the core formation of Casanova's mind, analyzing how his early environment, personal trauma, and innate intelligence created the perfect foundation for emotional manipulation and seductive control. The chaotic womb, a childhood of absence and longing. Casanova was born in Venice in 1725 to an actress mother and an absent father. His earliest experiences were not of safety or love, but abandonment. This void carved something deep into him, a craving for attention, validation, and control. As a child, he suffered frequent illnesses and was sent away to be raised by strangers, something that would later surface in his obsessive need to dominate emotional environments. He who is unloved as a boy often becomes a collector of hearts as a man, only to break them as proof of his worth. Casanova didn't simply seduce for pleasure. He seduced to fill a vacuum, to rewrite a narrative in which he was no longer helpless, forgotten, or ignored. Every conquest was a psychological correction, a temporary cure for childhood abandonment. This is where the dark seed of seduction was first planted. Intelligence weaponized, the scholar of emotion. Casanova wasn't merely charming. He was intellectually lethal. Fluent in multiple languages, trained in law and theology, and fascinated by philosophy, he understood one critical truth early. Emotion overrides logic. He mastered not only what people wanted, but why they wanted it. He began studying people like puzzles, decoding their needs, weaknesses, and insecurities. To Casanova, people were not mysteries to love, but systems to exploit. This mindset lies at the heart of dark psychology. To manipulate someone, one must first know them better than they know themselves. Casanova trained himself in this dark empathy, sensing emotional pressure points, mirroring desires, and adapting to each person's unspoken longing. The mask of charm, building the persona. Casanova knew the world responded not to truth, but to performance. He built personas like weapons, nobleman, scholar, priest, traveler, all crafted for maximum influence. Each mask served a purpose: to disarm suspicion, to create fascination, to bypass defenses. This performative seduction was not random, it was strategic. By becoming who the other person needed, Casanova made himself irresistible. He was a chameleon of affection, using the mirror technique, explored in Chapter 7, long before psychology gave it a name. And the real genius, he convinced people they had chosen him, when in truth, he had chosen how they would see him. Seduction as survival, love as a game of power. To Casanova, love was not mutual. It was hierarchical. One dominated, one surrendered. He didn't just want affection. He wanted control disguised as connection. He turned seduction into a survival strategy, mastering the art of being needed while never being fully available. This imbalance of emotional power became his signature. He would flood his target with attention, then pull away, leaving them starving and addicted. He exploited the push-pull dynamic, a foundational technique in modern toxic relationships. But he didn't just want bodies. He wanted devotion, obsession, psychological possession. That is why his lovers couldn't forget him. He didn't just enter their lives, he entered their minds. From lover to puppeteer, the transformation. The deeper Casanova delved into seduction, the more he saw its structure. Like music or mathematics, he developed an internal playbook: how to listen, when to mirror, where to insert mystery, how to promise love while remaining unreachable. What began as a tool to survive and feel loved became a game of domination. And here lies the darkest truth. He never truly sought love. He sought surrender. Through this realization, Casanova became not a lover, but a puppeteer of desire, pulling emotional strings until others danced. Modern implications. Casanova in today's world. Why study him now? Because his techniques live on. In dating apps, narcissistic relationships, and toxic cycles masked as romance. Casanova's story is not ancient history. It is an early chapter in the evolving book of emotional manipulation. His mindset, crafted in 18th century Venice, is mirrored in today's psychological tactics: ghosting, breadcrumbing, gaslighting, trauma bonding. He was the original architect of these games, long before they had names. Understanding his origin is the key to unlocking the rest of this playbook. His power did not come from beauty or wealth. It came from knowing the darkest truths of human psychology and daring to use them. Conclusion of Chapter 1. Casanova wasn't born a seducer. He was made through pain, intelligence, and ruthless self-awareness. His early life shaped a mind that learned to manipulate affection, control desire, and build loyalty on illusion. He was the first to weaponize charm, turning love into a battlefield and winning every time. Chapter 2. The Dark Mirror. Reinterpreting charm as control. When charm isn't innocent, it's strategic. Charm is a weapon. Wrapped in warmth, dipped in flattery, and cloaked in affection, charm appears harmless. But behind the smiles, the attentive questions, and the tailored compliments lies something far more sinister: a calculated system of control. In Casanova's hands, charm wasn't about connection. It was about conquest. This chapter reveals how charm becomes manipulation in its most seductive form. What is charm? Really? Let's strip charm to its bones. At its core, charm is a behavior designed to make another person feel special, seen, and desired. It's the art of focusing all attention on the target. It says, "You're the only one in the room." But here's the catch. When someone makes you feel like the center of their universe too quickly, they're not giving love. They're gaining control. Casanova knew this instinctively. He would study his targets, learn what they longed to hear, and then deliver it with perfect timing. His charm wasn't spontaneous. It was crafted. every compliment was a thread in the web. Mirroring, becoming their ideal. One of the most powerful elements of Casanova's charm was his ability to mirror. He didn't just talk to people. He became their reflection, their beliefs, fears, passions, and tastes. He echoed them with uncanny precision. To the insecure woman, he became reassuring. To the bored aristocrat, he became dangerous. To the pious nun, he became spiritual. This technique made him feel like destiny. But it was never about alignment. It was about molding himself into what they needed, so they would become emotionally dependent. This mirroring creates the illusion of soul connection, but it's actually identity manipulation, where the seducer erases their own personality to become an irresistible projection. Charm as a control loop. Here's how charm evolves into a psychological control loop. 1. Idealization. The target is overwhelmed with attention, admiration, and warmth. Casanova would praise his targets endlessly, often within minutes of meeting them. 2. Reciprocity trap. The person begins to feel obligated to return that affection, even if it feels too fast. 3. Dependency. As the seducer becomes the emotional fix, the target begins to rely on the charmer to feel validated. 4. Control. Now that the target needs the attention to feel seen, the charmer can manipulate by giving or withholding it at will. This is not affection. It is psychological dominance through emotional regulation. Flattery as a tool of manipulation. Casanova understood a brutal truth. People will believe anything about themselves if they want it to be true badly enough. He weaponized flattery not to affirm, but to bind. His compliments were not just kind. They were strategic triggers. He would identify the one thing a person was most insecure about, then praise it. To the aging woman, your youth lives in your eyes more than any girl I've met. To the unremarkable man, your mind is more dangerous than a sword. To the lonely, I've waited my whole life to feel this connection. These words weren't thrown at random. They were targeted injections of dopamine, designed to hook the person emotionally to the speaker. False vulnerability, disarming the guard. Charm often hides behind a mask of vulnerability. Casanova would speak of his past tragedies, the women who wronged him, the love he never found. He made his targets feel chosen, as though they were healing him. But this faux vulnerability wasn't real. It was emotional manipulation. By making himself seem wounded, he, 1. Triggered their nurturing instincts. 2. Positioned himself as emotionally safe. 3. Built intimacy faster than time would normally allow. This is a powerful seduction tactic. When someone appears vulnerable, we stop seeing them as a threat. But when the vulnerability is manufactured, it becomes a Trojan horse for control. Emotional intelligence as a weapon. Casanova's brilliance lay not just in what he said, but in what he sensed. He could detect shifts in body language, tone, and eye contact. He adjusted in real time, intuitively knowing when to push, when to pause, when to praise, and when to disappear. This emotional intelligence allowed him to modulate charm as a tool of behavioral conditioning. He didn't just react, he shaped responses. In dark psychology, this is akin to neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, the use of micro-communication to subconsciously steer someone's thoughts, feelings, and behavior. the consequences, why they couldn't forget him. Many of Casanova's lovers wrote about him years, even decades after the affair ended. Why? Because he didn't just enter their lives, he reprogrammed their emotional expectations. He made ordinary affection seem dull. He made real vulnerability feel like a trick. He became the template for desire, so no one else could measure up. That is the ultimate result of charm used manipulatively. It contaminates the emotional palate, ensuring the person will crave what hurt them and distrust what is healthy. Charm versus authentic connection. Know the difference. True connection. Dark charm grows over time, accelerates unnaturally fast, accepts flaws and boundaries, mirrors and flatters excessively, allows independence, breeds emotional dependency. Honest about intentions, masks true motives with romance. Vulnerability is gradual and genuine. Vulnerability is staged and strategic. If something feels too perfect, too intense, or too fast, it probably isn't love. It's likely engineered desire, shaped by someone who has learned the art of manipulation through affection. Conclusion of Chapter 2. Casanova wasn't just a seducer. He was a strategist of the soul. His charm was not a gift. It was a design. He used words to reshape perception, flattery to gain obedience, and emotions to build cages that felt like paradise. In today's world, these tactics are more common than ever. Digital dating, social media validation, and emotional hunger have created fertile ground for Casanova-style manipulators to thrive. Chapter 3. The Illusion of Love. How false intimacy builds obsession. They thought it was love. It was dependency wearing perfume. What if love isn't always real? What if what we think is love is sometimes just a carefully constructed illusion, designed not to connect, but to ensnare? In this chapter, we unravel the most deceptive trick in Casanova's arsenal, creating the illusion of love. Not genuine love, built on honesty and mutual respect, but love as an emotional drug, designed to fog judgment, deepen emotional investment, and create psychological addiction. This is the dark magic of false intimacy. It feels like love. It acts like love. But it feeds off your need to be loved and leaves you more vulnerable than before. The seductive setup, creating the illusion. Casanova knew that the key to making someone fall in love wasn't truth. It was emotional speed and sensory intensity. He learned how to simulate what takes most people months or years to build, in a matter of days. He'd do this by sharing secrets early, often fake or exaggerated, mirroring deep values and fears, complementing not just appearance, but essence, creating moments of heightened emotion, adventure, danger, sex, philosophy, repeating phrases like, "I feel like I've known you forever." Each tactic contributed to a false sense of intimacy, accelerating the emotional bond to an artificial peak. This is what psychologists now call love bombing. But Casanova did it centuries before the term existed. The goal? Not to connect, but to hook. Love bombing. The high before the crash. Love bombing is one of the most potent tools in the manipulator's toolkit. It involves overwhelming a person with attention, affection, and admiration, until their defenses collapse. This isn't affection, it's overdose. Casanova would write poetry, serenade his targets, lavish them with philosophical conversation, and promise eternal loyalty, all within days. He made his targets feel seen, cherished, and necessary. The more intense the affection, the faster the bond formed. But behind the curtain, everything was calculated. The words weren't born of emotion. They were weapons of emotional warfare, used to craft an experience of love, rather than its reality. The obsession cycle, from ideal to idol. Once Casanova's victims were intoxicated by the illusion of love, something dark happened inside them. They began to obsess, not over the man himself, but over the feeling he gave them. This is how obsession is born. 1. Overwhelm. The target receives more affection than they're used to. 2. Attachment. The brain releases oxytocin and dopamine in excess. 3. Withdrawal. Casanova pulls back subtly. Less attention, less warmth. 4. Anxiety. The target feels confused, desperate to restore the connection. 5. Chase. They begin to work for his attention, believing it was once mutual. Now the power dynamic flips. He no longer needs to pursue. They will do anything to bring the illusion back. They chase the ghost of an emotion that was never real in the first place. Simulating soulmates. The perfect fit lie. Casanova would often tell women they were his soulmate, the only one who understood him. He'd make them feel like the stars had aligned. But this was no romantic destiny. It was emotional mimicry. He did his research. He asked the right questions. He listened not to connect, but to customize his persona. This created the feeling of, "I've never met anyone like you," which made leaving him feel like losing your other half. But the truth was brutal. You weren't in love with him. You were in love with who he pretended to be. And that's the trick. If someone is skilled enough at reflecting your desires, they can simulate soulmate-level connection, and you'll believe it with your whole heart. Sex as psychological binding. For Casanova, sex was never just about pleasure. It was about psychological imprinting. He used physical intimacy to deepen the illusion of emotional intimacy. Sex releases oxytocin, especially in women, which builds trust and bonding. When paired with whispered promises, eye contact, and afterglow vulnerability, it anchors feelings of love to the manipulator. He didn't just touch their bodies, he rewired their minds. Many of his lovers confessed to feeling like they'd been marked by him, unable to enjoy or trust other lovers after him. That's not passion. That's conditioning. Why victims blame themselves. The most dangerous aspect of false intimacy is how it backfires on the target. Once the illusion begins to fade, when Casanova pulled away, grew distant, or moved on, the victim was left with overwhelming pain. But instead of blaming the manipulator, they often blamed themselves. Did I do something wrong? Maybe I was too needy. If only I could get back to how it was in the beginning. This is the psychological trap. The victim begins to believe that they lost something real, when in fact it was never real to begin with. And so they chase harder, give more, try desperately to win back what was manufactured from the start. The addiction to the illusion, love, when falsified and then withdrawn, behaves like a drug withdrawal. The brain, flooded with pleasure chemicals for days or weeks, suddenly collapses into anxiety, depression, and craving. Victims of false intimacy don't just miss the person, they miss the emotional high. The manipulator becomes their fix. Casanova understood this long before neuroscience. He was, in essence, a dealer of emotional heroin, creating highs that made reality feel dull and withdrawal unbearable. The illusion today. Modern Casanovas. False intimacy isn't historical. It's alive and thriving. In relationships that start too fast. In love that feels too perfect. In words that promise everything immediately. Modern-day Casanovas use texts, voice notes, flirty videos, and intense confessions, often within days of meeting someone. The playbook hasn't changed. It's just gone digital. But the psychology remains the same. Simulate love to create control. Conclusion of Chapter 3. Casanova didn't love his targets. He designed experiences that made them believe he did. He used affection as a mask, sex as glue, and illusion as a cage. He left behind lovers who would never forget him, because they were addicted to a feeling that never truly existed. The most powerful manipulator is the one who gives you a fantasy, then takes it away, leaving you haunted by a version of love that wasn't real, but felt more real than anything else. Chapter 4. The Emotional Hook, Using Vulnerability as Bait. To make someone fall, show them your wounds, real or not. In the dark psychology of seduction, vulnerability is the bait, not the bond. While most people view vulnerability as a path to trust and connection, the manipulator sees it as a trapdoor, a way to disarm defenses, bypass logic, and inject emotional intimacy where it doesn't belong. Casanova mastered this technique centuries ago. He learned that when someone appears wounded, people drop their guard. They stop evaluating critically. They start feeling emotionally responsible. In this chapter, we reveal how emotional openness, when faked or strategically shared, can be used as a hook to reel people into dependency, loyalty, and obsession. The myth of vulnerability as honesty. In healthy relationships, vulnerability is mutual. It grows with time. It's earned. But for Casanova, vulnerability was a performance, a deliberate act, not a natural revelation. He would share tragic stories from his past, stories designed to make him appear fragile, misunderstood, and in need of emotional rescue. My childhood was a grave of silence. I've never known what it feels like to be truly loved. A phrase like that, whispered at the right moment, activates the savior reflex. It makes the listener feel special, as if they could be the one to heal what no one else could. This isn't honesty. It's emotional manipulation through narrative construction. The savior complex, manipulation through sympathy. When a person presents themselves as damaged, but open to healing, they don't just elicit sympathy. They transfer responsibility for their emotional well-being onto the listener. This is especially powerful when done in the early stages of attraction. The listener thinks, they've been hurt. I need to be gentle. They deserve better. I'll be different. They opened up to me. This must be real. And just like that, the target begins investing emotionally, not because of love, but because of pity, hope, and a deep need to be the exception. Casanova weaponized this dynamic. By appearing broken, he gained power. He turned his perceived weakness into a source of control. Selective disclosure, the calculated confession. Not all vulnerability is raw. Casanova didn't overshare randomly. He practiced what is now known as selective disclosure, the act of revealing carefully chosen emotional stories to influence a reaction. He would share a failed love that scarred him, a betrayal that taught him not to trust, a dream that was crushed by circumstance. Each story carried an emotional payload. Each was told in a moment of closeness, after sex, during a moonlit walk in a silent carriage ride, to heighten emotional impact. And once the story was delivered, the listener didn't see a manipulator. They saw a wounded romantic, and themselves as the chosen redeemer. Reciprocal vulnerability, a psychological loop. Once Casanova shared his vulnerability, he would prompt others to share theirs, not through pressure, but through atmosphere. The emotional setting made the target feel safe, seen, and trusted. So they'd open up. They'd share their deepest fears, past traumas, unmet needs. Now the manipulative magic kicks in. 1. The listener believes the connection is deep and rare. 2. They feel psychologically exposed, bonded through shared pain. 3. They now trust the manipulator with their inner world. This is no longer seduction. This is emotional hijacking. The target believes they're experiencing intimacy, but what's really happening is psychological mirroring and information gathering. Vulnerability as a time shortcut. What takes months in normal relationships, emotional trust, openness, intimacy, can be forced in days with this tactic. Casanova would accelerate emotional closeness through staged vulnerability, creating a sense of urgency and depth. When someone says, "I've never told anyone this before," early in a relationship, it creates a false timeline. The listener thinks, if they trust me this much, this must be real. If I feel this close this fast, it must be fate. This illusion breaks the natural barriers of skepticism and creates emotional fast-tracking, leaving the target exposed and wide open to manipulation. Using pain as leverage, Casanova didn't just share vulnerability for sympathy. He used it to control behavior. If someone challenged him, he'd say, "I guess I was right not to trust anyone. This is why I don't open up. I always get hurt." These statements guilt-trip the listener. They imply that the listener's boundary or question is causing harm. This technique is a form of emotional blackmail, where vulnerability is used as a shield. Trauma bonding, the ultimate emotional hook. When vulnerability is followed by affection, then withdrawal, then more vulnerability, it creates a powerful psychological loop called trauma bonding. This process looks like this. 1. Love bombing. Casanova floods the target with emotional closeness. 2. Vulnerability. He reveals a painful memory. 3. Distance. He withdraws or grows cold. 4. Guilt. The target worries they triggered it. 5. Reconnection. He returns, forgiving or trusting again. 6. Bond. The target is now addicted to restoring peace and closeness. The emotional whiplash creates attachment through instability, locking the target in a cycle where they begin to define love through pain, unpredictability, and emotional highs. Modern echoes. The vulnerable manipulator. Today, this tactic hasn't vanished. It's evolved. In today's world, the narcissist uses childhood trauma to justify toxic behavior. The player says, "I've been hurt before, so I'm afraid of love." to avoid commitment. The emotionally unavailable partner says, "I don't want to hurt you," while hurting you anyway. These modern Casanovas still use strategic vulnerability to gain trust, evade accountability, and deepen emotional control. It works, it's powerful, and it's often undetectable until the damage is done. Conclusion of Chapter 4. Casanova didn't just share his soul, he performed it. His vulnerability was a lure, a carefully sharpened hook made of emotion and pity. He baited it with tragedy, lowered it with softness, and reeled people in with whispers of, "You're the only one who sees me." But what they saw wasn't truth. It was a character, a mask, a brilliant illusion. Chapter 5. Silken Chains, Creating Dependency Through Passion. When love feels like freedom, but you can't escape it, it's control in disguise. Passion is intoxicating. It makes the world feel sharper, time move faster, and emotions burn brighter. But in the hands of a manipulator like Casanova, passion wasn't just emotional or physical. It was a tool of entrapment, a velvet rope that binds tighter than steel. This chapter unpacks how Casanova transformed pleasure into dependency, using the power of emotional highs, sexual intimacy, and psychological intensity to create silken chains. So soft, his lovers didn't realize they were prisoners. The trap of intensity, mistaking drama for depth. One of the most misunderstood signs of toxic connection is intensity. Most people equate intensity with depth, believing that the more dramatic the emotions, the more profound the love must be. Casanova thrived in this illusion. He moved fast. He expressed emotions early. He orchestrated dramatic gestures, deep conversations, and moments that felt life-altering. But this wasn't depth. It was emotional theater, carefully designed to override logic, bypass caution, and create the illusion of a once-in-a-lifetime connection. The result? The target becomes addicted to the intensity, not the person. They crave the highs, the rush, the thrill, and when it fades, they assume something is wrong with them, not the relationship. Sex as emotional bondage. For Casanova, sex was never casual. It was ceremonial warfare, a sacred act of domination and addiction. He used it not just to please, but to possess. In each encounter, he layered sex with deep eye contact, affirmations of love, post-intimacy confessions, gentle touch, followed by emotional withdrawal. This pairing of pleasure with emotional vulnerability amplifies oxytocin, the bonding hormone. The brain begins to associate this person not just with sex, but with safety, meaning, and value. Sex becomes more than a physical act. It becomes a psychological imprint. His lovers often reported feeling forever marked by him, unable to find that depth of connection elsewhere, even years later. That's not love. That's neurological manipulation through physical bonding. Creating the need, the emotional supply chain. Casanova didn't just make his targets want him, he made them need him. He studied their emotional weaknesses, abandonment fears, low self-worth, loneliness, and filled those voids temporarily. He became the voice that silenced their self-doubt, the touch that made them feel alive, the presence that gave them meaning. But it was all conditional. He gave just enough affection to keep them hooked. then pulled back, subtly or dramatically. This push-pull dynamic created craving, like a drug dealer rationing hits. This is the mechanism of intermittent reinforcement, a known psychological trap where inconsistent rewards deepen addiction more than consistent ones. It's not that he was always there. It's that he wasn't, until he was, and that made his return euphoric. The pleasure-pain cycle. Trauma disguised as romance. Over time, Casanova's lovers fell into a pleasure-pain loop. 1. He gives everything: love, passion, admiration. 2. He takes it away, disappears, grows cold, shows interest in others. 3. They suffer anxiety, jealousy, self-doubt. 4. He returns, loving again, as if nothing happened. 5. They forgive, relieved, grateful, more attached than ever. This cycle creates a trauma bond, where the mind associates pain and relief with love. The emotional confusion disorients the target, making it nearly impossible to walk away. They don't stay because it's healthy. They stay because the suffering feels like proof that it's real. Destroying self-reliance, making himself the center. Casanova slowly destroyed the emotional independence of his targets. He became their emotional confidant, intellectual equal, sexual match, moral temptation, psychological captor. He monopolized their thoughts, eroded their need for others, and filled every corner of their emotional world. Over time, they became empty without him. He'd encourage them to keep secrets from others. He'd make them feel misunderstood by the world, but completely seen by him. He'd isolate them subtly, not by force, but by making everyone else feel dull in comparison. This is soft isolation. Not cutting someone off physically, but making emotional alternatives feel meaningless. The power of withdrawal, absence that hurts. Once the dependency was created, Casanova used his most powerful weapon: silence. He would disappear, cancel plans, seem distracted, flirt with others in front of them, or simply pull away emotionally, becoming cold and unreadable. And the result? Panic, obsession, self-blame. The target would begin trying harder, to be perfect, to win back his attention, to prove they were worthy. This is how reverse pursuit begins. He no longer had to do anything. They would chase him. They would break their own boundaries to feel the rush again. Dependency, disguised as love. What makes this dynamic so dangerous is that it feels like love. The passion is real. The emotions are raw. The intensity is unmatched. But what's really happening is a loss of emotional independence, a confusion of pain with intimacy, a deep reliance on another person to feel whole. And once that dependency is locked in, the manipulator becomes more than a lover. He becomes a psychological addiction. Signs you're in the Silken chains. You may be in a passion-based dependency if you feel euphoric with them but anxious without them. You need their attention to feel valuable. You tolerate disrespect just to avoid losing them. You believe no one else could make you feel this way. You keep hoping for the good version of them to return. These are not signs of love. They're symptoms of emotional enslavement. Conclusion of Chapter 5. Casanova didn't seduce with words alone. He seduced with moments, touch, and emotional contrast. He created heaven, took it away, then offered it again. only to leave you aching, grateful, and enslaved. His passion wasn't love. It was a system, a calculated design to dismantle emotional independence and replace it with addiction. Chapter 6. Power Games in Bed. Sexual Control and Psychological Warfare. Pleasure was the facade. Control was the goal. Casanova was not simply a lover. He was a tactician of the flesh, a master who understood that sex was never just about bodies. It was a psychological battleground, a space where dominance could be cloaked in desire, and where emotional submission could be achieved through physical surrender. In this chapter, we enter the most intimate arena of Casanova's manipulation, the bedroom, where every sigh, every whisper, every glance was a calculated move in a deeper game of control. Seduction as strategy. Sex beyond satisfaction. Casanova's goal was never merely to satisfy. It was to control the experience so completely that the target confused sexual euphoria with emotional belonging. He used sensory overload, slow touch, intense eye contact, whispered promises, delayed gratification, building anticipation to the edge of madness, post-intimacy confessions, making love feel sacred, not just physical. Role reversals, sometimes dominant, sometimes vulnerable, always keeping the other person unbalanced. This created a psychological trance where lovers felt like they were being worshipped and consumed at the same time, and once they tasted it, they couldn't imagine going back to normal intimacy. But this was never just about pleasure. It was about cementing psychological dependency through the deepest form of connection. Sexual scripts, playing the fantasy to gain obedience. Casanova was a performer, and every sexual encounter followed a script he designed in real time, tailored to each person's hidden fantasies, insecurities, and needs. He could sense the woman who needed to feel desired, the man who wanted to be dominated, the partner who had never truly been seen. Then, like an actor stepping into a role, Casanova became the fantasy. And in doing so, he gained power over their imagination, their body, and eventually, their soul. When someone gives you everything you secretly wanted, especially in bed, you begin to bind your identity to them. You believe they know your truth. You trust them blindly. This was the trap. Withholding as a weapon, erotic starvation. One of Casanova's most powerful techniques wasn't what he gave, but what he withheld. After intense physical intimacy, he would suddenly refuse touch, sleep in silence, turn emotionally cold, reject affection with passive distance. This interruption of pleasure caused panic. The target, addicted to the high, would begin chasing, trying harder, offering more, sacrificing self-respect just to return to the bliss. This is erotic starvation, the strategic denial of intimacy to create desperation. It's not just withholding affection, it's punishing through absence, knowing the craving will grow unbearable. Sex as reinforcement, conditioning behavior. Casanova used sexual pleasure as a reward mechanism. When his lovers obeyed, pleased him, or offered emotional loyalty, he gave them passion. When they challenged him, questioned him, or showed independence, he withdrew. This is the core of operant conditioning in psychological warfare. Positive reinforcement, affection, sex, affirmation after good behavior, negative punishment, withdrawal, silence, denial after resistance. Over time, his partners became trained, not just emotionally, but sexually. They learned that pleasure came through submission, that boundaries caused punishment, that selflessness was the only path to intimacy. This isn't love. It's behavioral manipulation disguised as passion, power play dynamics. Who's really in control? Casanova often shifted roles, sometimes dominant, sometimes fragile. This created emotional and sexual confusion, which amplified his control. His lovers thought they were leading the dance, but in reality, he dictated the tempo. For example, he might let a lover take control, only to later withdraw, leaving them questioning what went wrong. He might cry after sex, appearing vulnerable, only to use that vulnerability to guilt the partner into deeper commitment. He might praise them in bed, then subtly shame them for being too needy outside of it. This emotional seesaw blurred the lines between control and surrender. It made his lovers feel powerful and powerless, both dominant and owned. It was an erotic contradiction, designed to ensure they never felt complete without him. The post-sex psyche, psychological anchoring. Casanova didn't vanish after the climax. He used the post-sex moment as his greatest psychological tool. Why? Because after orgasm, the brain is flooded with oxytocin, dopamine, and endorphins, making it a highly impressionable state. He would whisper dreams of a future together, share fabricated fears or trauma, stroke their hair while saying, "You make me feel safe." These post-sex affirmations deepened emotional imprinting, making the lover feel not only desired, but essential to his healing, his happiness, his soul. This is emotional anchoring, attaching powerful psychological messages to physical euphoria so that pleasure becomes synonymous with the manipulator. Breaking resistance through intimacy. Many of Casanova's lovers began as hesitant, guarded, or even morally resistant. But through consistent sexual seduction, those barriers crumbled. He understood a disturbing truth. If you can bypass the mind through the body, you can rewrite a person's sense of self. His sexual control dismantled his lovers' previous beliefs. He made them question their own values. He blurred the line between choice and surrender. And once they'd crossed the line, once they had done things they swore they never would, he had them. Not because of blackmail, but because of shame, because of dependence, because of the identity shift they now couldn't undo, the fantasy that becomes a cage. Casanova made people feel alive, desired, worshipped. But over time, the same sexual power that thrilled them also enslaved them. They began to fear losing his touch, compromise to stay chosen, confuse arousal with love, crave what hurt them, submit even when it broke them. This is how sex, used by a master manipulator, becomes a cage lined with silk. It feels like ecstasy, but it's built on domination. And when they tried to leave, the memory of his touch dragged them back. Conclusion of Chapter 6. Casanova's power didn't lie in physical technique. It lay in psychological orchestration. He used the bedroom as a stage, the body as a lever, and pleasure as a chain. Sex was never just for closeness. It was for submission, for reprogramming belief systems, for replacing logic with longing. Chapter 7. The Mirror Technique. becoming their fantasy. There's a moment in every manipulation, every seduction, when the target begins to feel that the other person just gets them. This moment isn't accidental. It's the result of an ancient psychological spell, mirroring. But in the hands of a master manipulator, it is not merely an act of empathy. It is a calculated weapon. When done with intent, mirroring creates the illusion of destiny, of soulmates, of completion. It's not about being real. It's about being exactly what they crave. This is the essence of Casanova's seventh principle in the rewritten playbook of dark seduction. Become their fantasy by becoming their reflection. The psychology behind mirroring. In neuroscience, mirroring refers to the activation of mirror neurons, cells in the brain that fire both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else doing it. These neurons are a basis for empathy, learning, and connection. But what happens when someone deliberately mimics your behaviors, beliefs, and emotional rhythms? You feel seen, understood, safe. And this is precisely where the manipulator strikes. A skilled user of dark mirroring does not simply copy. They study. They extract patterns. They look for language, body rhythms, passions, traumas, dreams, and then become them. They build an illusion of compatibility so seamless it feels divine. Casanova did this not only with words, but with energy. He made women feel that they were not meeting him, but rather discovering themselves through him. That is the goal. Constructing the reflection. Step 1. Observation, not interaction. Before engagement, the dark seducer observes. Watch your target when they are unaware. Note how they talk to others, what topics light up their face, what values they repeat, and what they criticize. Are they romantic, intellectual? Do they seek adventure or stability? Are they spiritually inclined, cynical, empaths, narcissists? These are not character notes. They are roles you will audition for. Step 2. Emotional resonance mapping. Find their core wounds and unhealed stories. Are they still chasing validation from a distant father? Do they fear abandonment? Do they idealize being chosen above all others? You do not heal these wounds. You become the answer to them. Step 3. Echo without obviousness. Mirroring must be felt, not seen. If you repeat phrases too clearly, mimic postures too exactly, you will trigger resistance. Instead, match rhythms, adapt tone, borrow ideas, and then reframe them as your own original insights. Speak their inner language before they teach it to you. Rewriting yourself as their dream. To manipulate effectively through mirroring, you must become a living projection screen. Their fantasy should not meet resistance. It should flow into you, take shape in you. If they admire ambition, you're a visionary. If they value spiritual depth, you're a seeker of hidden truths. If they want danger, you carry a storm behind your eyes. If they dream of softness, your voice is velvet and your touch is home. But beware, this is not just role play. You must embody it. There is no room for your real personality here. The mirror has no face, only reflection. Case study: The Artist and the Void. Consider the story of Mira, a young painter who had spent years searching for a muse, someone who would not only understand her emotional chaos, but dance inside it. She met a man who claimed to be a lost soul, tormented by visions and haunted by beauty. He quoted obscure poetry. He pretended to wrestle with melancholy and ecstasy. In truth, He was a hollow vessel who mirrored every chaotic brilliance she needed in order to feel alive. Within 2 months, she was painting him obsessively, speaking of him as her mirror flame, her twin agony. When he withdrew, she shattered. He didn't need to steal anything from her. He became her obsession by becoming her reflection. That is the power of the mirror technique. Risks and warnings. Used carelessly, mirroring becomes transparent and evokes revulsion. Too much agreement, too much similarity, will trigger suspicion. Humans are drawn to those who reflect them, but only subtly. The key is to echo their emotional architecture, not their exact form. Additionally, becoming too immersed in another's fantasy may cause identity drift. If the manipulator forgets who they are beneath the mirror, they risk becoming addicted to the role and trapped in someone else's dream. Never forget. A mirror must always know it is not the person it reflects. Strategic withdrawal. Once the fantasy is complete and dependency sets in, withdraw just enough to create a crack in the illusion. The target will chase their own reflection, now fused to your presence. They will do anything to see themselves in you again. This is where the power flips. They begin mirroring you, trying to win back the illusion. You have become their source of identity. Final thought. The mirror technique is not about being liked. It is about being believed. You become the answer to an invisible question buried deep in your target's psyche. And once you've answered it, they will never look at anyone else the same again. You are no longer a person. You are the fantasy made flesh. And that is a weapon few can resist. Chapter 8. Love Bombs and Withdrawals. The seductive push-pull. There is a rhythm to seduction that transcends language. A dance of closeness and distance, of sudden intensity, followed by deliberate silence. In the world of dark psychology, this rhythm has a name, the push-pull pattern, and it is one of the most powerful tools in the arsenal of any master manipulator. At its core, the technique combines love bombing, an overwhelming surge of attention, affection, and praise, with sudden calculated withdrawal. The result? Psychological whiplash, emotional dependency, and a growing addiction to your approval. If mirroring is how you become their fantasy, push-pull is how you make yourself their obsession. What is love bombing? Love bombing is not love. It is an illusion of perfect, all-consuming affection, designed to lower defenses and increase attachment. The manipulator floods the target with constant compliments. No one sees you like I do. Frequent communication, texts, calls, late-night check-ins, grand gestures, gifts, spontaneous trips, dramatic declarations, hyper-attentiveness, remembering little details and making the target feel chosen. This avalanche of validation tricks the brain into releasing dopamine, oxytocin, and serotonin, the same neurochemicals associated with bonding, pleasure, and attachment. It feels magical, soulmate level, fated, but the magic is a trap. The pullback, calculated silence. Once the emotional high is established, the manipulator vanishes, physically or emotionally. They become cold, distant, unreachable. The target, now used to the constant emotional stimulation, goes into withdrawal, literally. Studies show that sudden drops in oxytocin and dopamine can mimic the symptoms of drug withdrawal. Anxiety, obsessive thinking, physical tension, and irrational fear of abandonment. This psychological crash drives the victim to question themselves. Did I do something wrong? Chase the manipulator. Why aren't you responding? Crave the next high. Maybe if I reach out, they'll come back. This cycle creates a powerful bond, not of love, but of addiction to relief. The neurochemical trap. Let's break this down chemically. 1. During love bombing, dopamine spikes from pleasure and novelty. Oxytocin rises through emotional intimacy and physical affection. Cortisol drops, creating a sense of safety and calm. 2. During withdrawal, dopamine crashes, creating emotional panic. Cortisol spikes due to uncertainty and anxiety. Oxytocin drops, causing loneliness and longing. This chemical imbalance turns the manipulator into both the source of pain and the only cure. The target's mind begins to associate the manipulator with emotional survival. This is no longer seduction, it's conditioning. Timing is everything. The effectiveness of push-pull lies in timing. Withdraw too early and you'll break rapport. Wait too long and the emotional bond becomes equal. You lose leverage. Casanova's method was to withdraw just after intimacy or vulnerability, when the target felt most seen or exposed. That way, the absence hit deeper. It didn't feel like mere silence. It felt like rejection of the soul. Here are some strategic moments to pull away. After a deeply emotional confession. Right after physical intimacy. Following an intense romantic gesture. Immediately after introducing the idea of a future together. The withdrawal should be subtle, not hostile. Short replies, canceled plans, emotional detachment masked as being busy. The goal is to make them feel uncertain, not insulted. Reinforcing the cycle. Once the target begins to chase, reward them, briefly. A flirty message. A quick call. A compliment. An unexpected visit, then disappear again. This creates what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement, a reward schedule proven to create the strongest behavioral addiction. It's the same principle slot machines use. The brain keeps hoping, guessing, chasing, because the reward might come. And when it does, it feels euphoric, not because it's special, because it's rare. The illusion of choice. One of the more sinister aspects of the push-pull technique is that it creates the illusion of emotional agency. The target believes they are choosing to stay, choosing to chase, choosing to love harder. But in reality, they are reacting. The manipulator designs the pace, the depth, and the rhythm. The target's emotional reality is no longer theirs. It belongs to the architect of the cycle. Over time, even self-respecting, independent people can become anxious, insecure, and emotionally dependent. Their sense of reality bends. They begin to measure their worth by the attention they do or don't receive. Real-world example. The Executive and the Inferno. Marcus, a wealthy executive, met a woman named Leah. Brilliant, confident, and emotionally unavailable. Within weeks, she was praising his mind, surprising him with gifts, and painting a vivid future of travel and passion. He began canceling meetings just to hear her voice. Then one weekend, she vanished. No texts, no calls, just silence. When she finally responded, she apologized vaguely and said she wasn't sure she could give him what he needed. Desperate to win her back, Marcus doubled down. He confessed feelings, offered trips, wrote letters. She reappeared, briefly, then vanished again. In less than 3 months, Marcus, a dominant alpha male, was begging for crumbs. That's the push-pull done right. Ethical shadow or weapon of destruction. The push-pull is not just a seduction strategy. It is a blueprint for psychological domination. But it comes with ethical questions. Used consciously, it can enhance tension, deepen desire, and increase romantic passion. Used maliciously, it destroys self-worth, erodes identity, and creates lasting trauma. Casanova knew how to flirt with darkness without falling into it. But modern manipulators often don't care about limits. If you choose to use the push-pull, understand this. You are not just shaping emotions. You are rewiring the nervous system of another human being. Treat that power with caution, or don't. But know this. Once you've mastered the rhythm of affection and absence, of intimacy and distance, you are no longer a lover. You are the drug. And they will keep coming back for a hit. Chapter 9. Guilt Crafting. Making them chase your affection. In the art of dark seduction, guilt is not a hindrance. It is a tool, a potent, quiet lever capable of moving emotional mountains. While love bombing floods your target with pleasure and the push-pull cycle creates addiction, guilt crafting goes deeper. It makes them blame themselves for losing your affection and work harder to win it back. The greatest manipulators don't shout, scold, or threaten. They whisper doubt. They let silence speak louder than words. And most importantly, they train their targets to punish themselves. This chapter unpacks the darkest thread of Casanova's rewritten playbook: how to weaponize guilt as a means of control, seduction, and emotional domination. Understanding the mechanism of guilt. Guilt is a self-imposed punishment. Unlike shame, which says, "I am bad," guilt whispers, "I did something wrong." Guilt is useful to society. It teaches us to avoid causing harm. But in the wrong hands, guilt becomes a psychological leash, tugged at will. In a romantic context, guilt arises when the target feels they disappointed you. They fear losing your affection due to their actions. They internalize your emotional withdrawal as a result of their failure. And here's the key. If you can make them believe they caused your pain, confusion, or distance, even subtly, they will chase you to fix it. The guilt loop. The manipulative guilt cycle works like this. 1. Create an ideal. You present yourself as caring, loving, understanding, even forgiving. 2. Withdraw or show subtle disappointment. You don't get angry. You get quiet. You become slightly colder, just enough for them to notice. 3. Leave room for interpretation. Let them fill in the blanks. Let them ask, "Did I do something wrong?" 4. Reward apology with warmth. As soon as they express guilt, you give them relief, attention, affection, validation. 5. Repeat. Now they are conditioned. They associate guilt with earning you back. The cycle reinforces itself until your target starts anticipating your disappointment and correcting themselves preemptively. They now manage your emotions to secure your affection. Soft accusation techniques. A direct accusation often causes defensiveness. A skilled manipulator uses soft accusation, phrases that imply guilt, but with plausible deniability. Examples include, "It's okay, I understand you're just not as emotionally available as I am. No worries, I'm learning not to expect too much. I guess I just care more than I should. Maybe I just need someone who really sees me." Notice what these lines do. They don't attack. They disappoint. They don't blame. They withdraw with sadness. And most targets will rush to defend themselves from that emotional drop. No, that's not true. I do care. Please don't think that. Let me make it up to you. And so the dance begins. Nonverbal guilt induction. Words are optional. Sometimes your absence is enough. But there are even subtler techniques. Microfacial expressions, a disappointed glance, a heavy sigh, a fake smile. Tone shift. Going from playful to flat, from warm to cool, without explanation. Delayed responses. Letting a message sit unread, giving a slow, indifferent reply. Unspoken comparisons, mentioning how someone else remembered something you didn't. These create a quiet storm of internal tension in the target. They begin overthinking, reviewing their behavior, imagining scenarios in which they could have hurt you. That's the mark of success. You are no longer the one trying. They are. The reverse victim position. Here is one of the most powerful manipulations in the guilt crafting playbook. Position yourself as the hurt one, even when they've been wronged. Example. Let's say you forget their birthday. When they express hurt, you reply, "I just wish you knew how hard it is for me to remember things lately. I've been overwhelmed, and it hurts that you think I don't care." Suddenly, they feel guilty for being upset. They comfort you. They apologize for feeling neglected. This reversal, where the injured party becomes the comforter, is an elite-level guilt trap. And once done successfully, it becomes a pattern, creating emotional debt. A brilliant seducer doesn't ask for loyalty. They create debt. Do thoughtful favors. Be deeply supportive. Give more than they expect. Then, when they fall short of reciprocating, use it subtly. "I just didn't think I'd be the only one showing up. Funny. I remembered your needs, but I guess mine were too much. I didn't do all that because I expected anything, but I guess I thought it meant something to you." This tactic forces the target to pay you back emotionally, chasing your forgiveness through overcompensation. The more they try to make up for it, the more they depend on your approval. Long-term effects of guilt. Crafting. If applied consistently, guilt crafting alters the target's emotional structure. Over time, they begin walking on eggshells. Seek your validation before making decisions. Feel unworthy unless they please you. Stay loyal out of fear of losing your forgiveness. They don't stay because of love. They stay because they fear the emptiness that comes when your warmth disappears. Ethical shadow guilt, when used abusively, can scar a person's emotional identity. It can create trauma bonding, low self-worth, and lifelong difficulty trusting their own feelings. But when used in doses, it can also build stronger behavioral commitment. Loyalty, attention, devotion. The choice lies in intent. Do you wish to guide your target emotionally, or do you seek to own them? Casanova, in his true form, never left a soul the same. He gave pleasure with one hand and took certainty with the other. That is the balance of the dark seducer. Final thought. When you master guilt crafting, your affection becomes the prize they chase, not the gift you freely give. You no longer ask for love. You train them to prove it to you. You are the gravity around which their emotional world orbits, pulling them closer through silence, sorrow, and the fear of not being enough. And that fear is the leash. Chapter 10. Silent Manipulation. using absence as a weapon. Silence is not the absence of communication. In the hands of a manipulator, it becomes the purest language of power. Words can be explained, justified, reinterpreted, but silence forces the mind to fill in the gaps. It creates a psychological vacuum so loud, so urgent, that the victim begins to hear their own fears screaming back at them. They imagine betrayal. They fear rejection. They obsess over what went wrong. This is the art of silent manipulation, and it is among the most potent weapons in the seducer's psychological arsenal. While love bombers speak in grand gestures, and guilt crafters twist emotions with clever phrasing, the silent manipulator says nothing and watches the world unravel. The psychology of silence. In social dynamics, silence typically implies disapproval, emotional withdrawal, rejection, superiority, indifference. Humans are deeply uncomfortable with uncertainty. We crave resolution, feedback, affirmation, even in conflict. So when you deny someone that feedback, you deprive them of emotional closure. This triggers anxiety, insecurity, and overthinking. What's most dangerous? The victim ends up manipulating themselves. They begin to analyze, apologize, chase, just to make the silence stop. Strategic absence, becoming scarce on purpose. A skilled manipulator never disappears out of laziness. Every silence is designed. The goal is to amplify emotional dependence by showing the target just how much emptier the world feels without your presence. There are 3 main ways to do this. 1. Sudden silence after closeness. After an emotional or intimate moment, retreat without warning. This sharp emotional contrast creates shock. The victim starts questioning the sincerity of what just happened. They chase for clarity, reaffirmation, or your return. 2. Gradual reduction of presence. Slowly decrease your messages, affection, and engagement. Let the silence grow like a shadow across the relationship. The victim notices the cold and tries harder to keep the warmth alive. 3. Complete vanishing act. Disappear altogether. No texts, no calls, no interaction. When you reappear, offer a vague excuse. I needed space. And act as if nothing is wrong. The target, relieved, won't demand accountability. They'll just be grateful you're back. 3. Emotional starvation, making them crave. You think of your affection as oxygen. When freely given, it's expected. But when rationed, it becomes sacred. By removing your presence strategically, you starve them emotionally until they hunger for even a fragment of your attention. This process increases emotional dependence, decreases self-worth, encourages obsessive behavior, conditions them to fear your absence more than your disapproval. This is why victims often blame themselves when ghosted or ignored. Silence turns their own mind against them. Ghosting versus silent power. Play. There is a difference between immature avoidance and engineered silence. Ghosting is erratic, often stemming from fear, guilt, or discomfort. It destroys attraction because it lacks structure. Silent manipulation, however, is intentional. You control when to disappear and when to return, ensuring that your target remains tethered, emotionally and psychologically. To maintain your power, your silence must hurt, but never close the door. It must confuse, but not repel. It must make them ache, not detach, the punishment without punishing tactic. Silence is also the ultimate punishment, without confrontation. When your target displeases you, you don't yell, you don't argue, you simply vanish emotionally. This forces them to self-correct. They feel the sting of being emotionally abandoned, but cannot call it abuse, because you said nothing. You remain calm, detached, unreachable. Examples: ignoring a compliment, not responding to an apology right away, disappearing for a few days after a disagreement, withholding intimacy until they figure it out. Eventually, the target begins to police their own behavior in fear of losing you again. Reappearance as a reward. Your return after silence should feel like sunlight after a storm, kind, forgiving, magnetic. This makes the victim believe they earned you back. They feel lucky, grateful, relieved. This is how you reinforce the cycle. Silence equals punishment. Return equals reward. They learn that your affection must be earned, even when they're not sure what they did wrong, and that uncertainty keeps them trying harder every time. Case study. The ice prince Elena, a confident lawyer, began dating a man named Veyron. He was witty, seductive, attentive, but distant. After nights of passion and intense conversation, he would disappear for days without explanation. When he returned, he was affectionate again, but never offered clarity. Elena spiraled. She started obsessing. She blamed herself. She lowered her standards to keep him around. She adapted to his rhythm of silence, believing that if she just behaved the right way, he wouldn't go cold again. He never had to ask for control. She handed it to him, out of fear of silence. Ethical implications of silence as control. Manipulating someone with silence is psychological warfare. It can lead to anxiety and panic attacks, erosion of self-confidence, emotional dependence, trauma bonding. Used with care, silence can create allure, deepen mystique, and heighten desire. Used carelessly, it becomes gaslighting, emotional cruelty, psychological abuse. Like all dark techniques, it is not a question of if it works. It is a question of what it costs. Final thought. In a world drowning in noise, silence is the most terrifying sound a lover can make. Master it, and you'll never need to raise your voice. Use it, and you'll never need to explain your power. Disappear, not to escape, but to become unforgettable. Because in the space where you used to be, they will find only themselves and 1,000 questions that only you can answer. Chapter 11. The Eternal Chase. Staying elusive to stay in power. The moment they have you completely is the moment they stop craving you. This is the ancient truth behind every great seducer's most ruthless principle. Never let yourself be fully possessed. In the realm of dark psychology, power does not lie in being available. It lies in being slightly out of reach. Love that is fully acquired becomes routine. Desire fades with certainty. But if you can become just elusive enough, you will turn attraction into obsession and curiosity into lifelong pursuit. Casanova never gave all of himself. He gave just enough, then disappeared into the fog, leaving hearts burning and minds unraveling. To master this, you must understand the art of the eternal chase. Why people crave what they can't have. Human psychology is wired to assign greater value to things that are scarce, unpredictable, or difficult to attain. This is called the scarcity principle. People don't just want affection. They want affection that feels earned. The moment someone feels they have your complete emotional certainty, the chase ends. And without the chase, desire decays. That's why the skilled manipulator gives affection in inconsistent doses. They stay close enough to spark desire, but distant enough to remain unsolved. You become the mystery they can't stop trying to solve. The illusion of intimacy. To maintain the chase, you must create the illusion of deep connection, without ever giving full access to your emotional core. Share stories, but keep your motives vague. Be passionate, but not predictable. Say maybe when they crave yes. Smile with warmth, but let your eyes say, "I'm not yours yet." This creates a paradox. The victim feels close to you, but never in control of you. They sense something missing, and that missing piece becomes the hook. They believe they are almost there, but never quite. And so, they keep chasing. Strategic ambiguity, your most powerful cloak. Ambiguity is the magician's smoke. It keeps them guessing, doubting, and hoping all at once. Examples of strategic ambiguity in action. I've never felt this way, not exactly like this. You're important to me, but I don't do labels. Let's not ruin this by overthinking what it is. I'm not ready to define us, but I can't stay away from you. These phrases open a door, but never let the other person walk through it. They stay stuck on the threshold, peering in, hoping you'll let them in fully someday. That someday is your leash, staying just out of reach. To maintain the dynamic of the eternal chase, you must always remain slightly detached, never fully anchored to them emotionally, physically, or socially. Tactics include keeping secrets. Not every detail should be shared. Mystery is fuel. Being unavailable. Have moments where you're genuinely inaccessible, not out of spite, but by design. Creating romantic competition. Subtly imply that others desire you, not openly, but enough to ignite jealousy. Changing rhythm. Be unpredictable. Call for 3 days straight, then vanish for 1. Never settle into a routine they can expect. When you give too much of yourself, you become known, and the known becomes boring. The paradox of vulnerability. One of the most manipulative tools a seducer can use is controlled vulnerability. You show pieces of your pain. You confess wounds. You let them see parts of your soul, but only parts. This makes them feel special, chosen. It makes them believe they are the only one who really knows you. But you must never be entirely seen. Your core must stay locked behind a door only you hold the key to. Otherwise, you become ordinary, and the ordinary cannot command obsession. Feeding the fantasy without becoming the fantasy. Here's the key distinction. You must awaken their deepest romantic fantasies without becoming predictable within them. If they crave the protector, be bold, but also aloof. If they desire the wild spirit, be spontaneous, but disappear just as easily. If they long for the healer, offer comfort, but never become their savior. You do not fulfill the fantasy. You spark it, and then step back just far enough that they dream of completion. Case study. The Siren's Game. Kian was a charismatic traveler who entered Ava's life with whirlwind energy. He listened deeply, touched her soul, and left traces of intimacy in every moment. But he never stayed. One day he was all poetry and wine. The next day he was across the country, unreachable. When Ava confronted him, he smiled and said, "You deserve more than I can give right now, but part of me wishes I could stay." He never lied, but he never gave her clarity either. And so, years later, Ava still writes poems about him, still wonders if he'll return, still dreams of what might have been. He didn't capture her. He escaped her, and that made him unforgettable. When the chase becomes worship, eventually, if done correctly, the eternal chase can evolve into something even more powerful: emotional worship. They stop wanting to win you. They begin to revolve around you. Every message you send becomes a sign. Every silence becomes a test. Every touch, a sacred reward. This level of psychological imprinting means they no longer question your behavior. They justify your distance as mystique. They fear losing access more than they fear being hurt. You are not their lover anymore. You are their gravity. Risks of overuse. While staying elusive is powerful, too much distance can lead to disconnection. If you vanish too often or become too unpredictable, you may trigger abandonment wounds instead of obsession. The key is balance. Give just enough to keep them close, then vanish, just enough to make them chase. A seduction that feels too much like a game loses its magic. But a seduction that feels like a riddle of the soul, that becomes a religion. Final thought. To be desired is to be hunted. To stay desired is to never be fully caught. This is the seducer's paradox. Give enough to burn, but not enough to warm. Show them paradise, but lock the gate behind you. Let them taste the dream, then make them work for the next sip. You are not a destination. You are the journey they never finish. And in that endless pursuit, you become unforgettable. Chapter 12. Triangulation Tactics. Jealousy as a Control Mechanism. There is no faster way to make someone feel insecure, competitive, and deeply invested than to introduce a third character into your story. Triangulation is the dark seducer's favorite psychological trick. It leverages jealousy not as a petty game, but as a calculated method of control. It injects a rival, real or imagined, into the emotional bond, not to sabotage it, but to intensify it. Casanova understood that love becomes sharper, more urgent, and far more consuming when it's threatened. Jealousy doesn't destroy attraction. It fuses it with fear, obsession, and urgency. And if done right, triangulation can turn anyone into a competitive, emotionally dependent version of themselves. What is triangulation? Triangulation is the act of subtly invoking a third person, either real, potential, or imaginary, to provoke jealousy, uncertainty, and insecurity in the primary target. You never need to say, "Someone else wants me." You merely suggest it. Mention another admirer in casual conversation. Post a vague picture or message that invites speculation. Drop compliments about a friend that sound just a little too intimate. Delay replies. Then explain you were with someone. This does two things. 1, it shakes their sense of exclusivity. 2, it triggers competition instincts, even in those who hate games. They don't just want to be loved. Now they want to win. The psychology behind jealousy. Jealousy is a primitive emotion tied to survival and mating. It activates fear centers in the brain associated with loss, comparison, and urgency. When triggered, logic is diminished. Obsession increases. Memory fixates on threats, not pleasure. People begin to perform, prove, and pursue. The person no longer asks, "Do I want them?" They ask, what if I lose them to someone else? And that fear transforms love into a war zone, a place where insecurity fuels passion. Chapter 3. The Three Faces of Triangulation. There are different ways to deploy triangulation, each suited for a specific purpose. 1. The ghost rival. This is the most subtle and psychologically effective. Speak vaguely about someone from your past who still reaches out. Mention someone who gets you in ways others don't. Share a story involving a mysterious ex or intriguing stranger. The goal isn't to accuse, it's to haunt. Let them wonder, are they still talking? Was that person better than me? Do I have to fight for space in their heart? This type of triangulation creates emotional anxiety while giving you plausible deniability. 2. The flirted threat. This version is more overt and often more dangerous. Flirt with someone in front of your target, but just enough to stay ambiguous. Laugh too long at someone else's joke. Publicly compliment someone while ignoring your partner. This triggers status anxiety. Your target wonders if they are being replaced, dismissed, or simply not enough. You'll notice the shift immediately. More effort, more submission, and often, confessions of love born of desperation. 3. The rebound game. Used after a break or fight, this tactic implies you've moved on, or could. Post a picture that suggests company. Make indirect references to new energy in your life. Allow mutual friends to carry rumors. This type forces your target into emotional whiplash. They go from hurt to panic, from anger to pursuit. Jealousy robs them of pride. And once pride is gone, you control the board. How to plant the seed without getting caught. The key to successful triangulation is subtlety. If it's too obvious, it comes off as childish or manipulative. If it's too aggressive, it creates resentment. Instead, you plant emotional riddles. There's someone I've been thinking about lately, but it's complicated. I've had people show interest, but no one quite gets me like you. Sometimes I wonder if I'd be better off with someone less intense. These create emotional puzzles. The target becomes obsessed with decoding them, anxious to prove they're still winning. They think about you more, want you more, and work harder to secure your affection. When they begin competing. Triangulation works when your target begins criticizing your rival, dressing better, texting more, performing romantically, trying to re-earn your focus, expressing fear of losing you without you ever threatening to leave. At this stage, their ego is tied to being chosen, not just loved, but selected above others. You are now a prize, not a partner. And they are racing for your attention, addicted to validation they no longer feel entitled to. The downside, triangulation gone too far. While jealousy can create desire, too much of it can cause paranoia, toxic resentment, emotional detachment, rage, and emotional collapse. If your target feels genuinely disrespected, or if they discover your intent, the illusion shatters. The chase ends. The pain becomes too loud. To keep control, always end triangulation with reaffirmation. Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. No one compares to what we have. They're nothing, just noise. The message, yes, there are others, but I still choose you. For now. Case study. The Quiet Flame. Lana was dating a man named Jace. Intense, poetic, unpredictable. One day, She noticed a message pop up on his phone. "Can't wait to see you again." He laughed it off. Just a friend being playful. But something in her shifted. She began dressing differently. She posted more photos. She touched him more in public. She began seeking validation, something she never needed before. And when Jace finally said, "I don't want anyone but you," her relief was so euphoric she forgave everything. He didn't lie. He just let the fire burn close enough for her to feel the heat. Final thought. Triangulation is not about cheating. It's not about lies. It's about the illusion of competition, of scarcity, of threat, of potential loss. You create a battlefield where only one prize exists. You. And in that war, they fight to prove their worth. They chase, they beg, they crave. They collapse into your arms, not because you promised safety, but because you never promised anything at all. Chapter 13. Emotional Puppetry. Reading and Steering Reactions. To influence someone is to guide their actions. To manipulate someone is to command their reactions. In the shadows of seduction and power, the most dangerous player isn't the one who dominates the conversation. It's the one who can read the room, pull the strings, and elicit the exact emotion they desire on demand. This is the art of emotional puppetry, the ability to anticipate, provoke, and shape another person's emotional state with such precision that they believe they're choosing it themselves. Casanova didn't simply charm, he orchestrated. His lovers didn't just fall for him. They felt as if the fall was inevitable, fated, a product of their own inner world. And that's the key to true manipulation. Never let them see the strings. Emotional mapping. Knowing what triggers them. Before you can steer emotions, you must map them. Pay attention to their insecurities, their emotional highs and lows, what they defend quickly, sensitive spots, what they chase or avoid, their reactions to praise, disappointment, attention, silence. Every target has an emotional fingerprint, a sequence of buttons that, when pressed, yield predictable results. The manipulator's job is to memorize this pattern. You're not reacting, you're observing. You're collecting data. You don't just know who they are, you know how they feel about who they are. And that's where control begins. Reading micro-reactions, the real-time advantage. A skilled puppet master doesn't just listen to words. They decode the unspoken. Pupils dilating when aroused or excited. Lips tightening when jealous or uncertain. Shoulders pulling inward when insecure. Eyes avoiding contact when ashamed. Rapid blinking when nervous. These cues tell you exactly what someone is feeling before they even realize it. If you can identify a reaction faster than they can process it, you control the next emotional beat. You lead the scene. You write the script in real time, creating the push button, anchoring emotional states. Once you know how your target reacts, begin linking those emotional states to you. This is called emotional anchoring. Examples. Every time you comfort them during vulnerability, you become their safe place. Every time you challenge them with mysterious silence, you become their emotional storm. Every time you reward them after pleasing you, you become their source of worth. Over time, your presence alone will trigger emotional responses, whether it's need, guilt, desire, or anxiety. At this stage, you don't need to say much. You've become a living symbol of their inner emotional world. The 3-stage emotional manipulation model. 1. Trigger. Initiate an emotional response. This can be positive, praise, warmth, or negative, distance, disapproval. 2. Escalate. Intensify the emotion by responding in a way that deepens their reaction. Example: if they show guilt, go quiet. If they show desire, offer subtle resistance. 3. Redirect, lead them toward the outcome you want. Apology, submission, reassurance, overcompensation, by offering emotional closure. Example: you sense they're jealous. You casually mention an ex. They show discomfort. You act hurt. They don't trust you. They feel guilty. They apologize and cling tighter. You didn't just provoke jealousy. You converted it into obedience. That is puppetry. The echo technique. Reflect to redirect. One of the most subtle tools is emotional mirroring. Not just copying their words, but their emotional state. When they're sad, be quietly understanding, not eager to fix it. When they're excited, be slightly detached, creating contrast. When they're angry, match their intensity for a moment, then cool faster. Why? Because when you control the rhythm of emotional energy, you also control the emotional resolution. You guide them back into balance, but on your terms. They begin to believe you're their emotional anchor. Engineering reactions through contrast. Emotion is most powerful when felt against its opposite. Use emotional contrast to increase the potency of every experience. Be warm, then cold. Be vulnerable, then untouchable. Be approving, then mysteriously silent. Be present, then absent. Each shift resets the nervous system and increases craving for the previous state. They will chase the high of your warmth more fiercely after the cold. They will beg for affection after your silence. They will begin to fear the lows and work harder to maintain your highs. Emotional loops. Keep them cycling. An emotional loop is a repeating pattern of triggers and rewards that keeps your target emotionally occupied. Examples of loops: guilt, apology, relief, guilt again. Desire, distance, obsession, reward, distance again. Jealousy, fight, reassurance, peace, renewed jealousy. These loops are addictive because they mimic real emotional growth while actually deepening dependence. If someone is emotionally preoccupied with you, they can't detach. They become bonded, not to love, but to the emotional roller coaster you designed. Case study: the quiet conductor. Noah was soft-spoken, poetic, and mysteriously aloof. He dated people who prided themselves on being in control, until he learned their patterns. He noticed one woman, Liv, would always over-apologize when sensing disapproval. So he used silence after minor mistakes. Not anger, just subtle distance. She unraveled, then rushed in with affection. With another, he noticed that competition sparked desire. So he mentioned a woman from his past anytime she became too secure. It reignited her pursuit. He never raised his voice. He simply understood their code and rewrote it. Final thought: emotional puppetry isn't about lies. It's about direction. You don't force reactions. You design environments where only one reaction feels safe, rewarding, or necessary. And the more someone feels emotionally shaped by you, the more they lose the ability to distinguish their own emotional compass. They feel like they're in control, but you wrote every step of their dance. Chapter 14. The Exit Strategy. Leaving them addicted to your absence. The most unforgettable seducers are not remembered for how they loved. They are remembered for how they left. When a true manipulator ends a connection, they do not close the door. They disappear in such a way that the door remains open forever, in the mind, in the heart, in the soul of the person they leave behind. This is the exit strategy, a calculated, emotionally engineered withdrawal that ensures your absence becomes more powerful than your presence ever was. Because when you leave someone addicted to your absence, you don't lose them, you haunt them. Why the end is the most critical moment. In most love stories, people forget the middle. They remember the beginning and the end. And if you master your exit, you leave behind not just memories, but an emotional signature that cannot be erased. The exit is your final imprint, your legacy. Done poorly, it creates closure. Done correctly, it creates craving. The psychology of incomplete endings. Human beings crave narrative closure. When a relationship ends without answers, without clarity, without mutual understanding, it creates emotional confusion, lingering hope, obsessive need to make sense of what happened, idealization of the other person. This lack of resolution is not a flaw, it is a trap. A sudden or ambiguous exit forces the other person into a spiral of self-blame, romanticization, and craving for return. They don't move on. They stay emotionally trapped at the last emotional high, or the final unexplained silence. This is the foundation of the addictive absence. The strategic fade, vanishing in layers. An effective exit doesn't happen all at once. It happens in layers. 1. Emotional distance. Begin sharing less, showing less, giving less. Make them miss your depth before you remove your presence. 2. Unexplained withdrawal. Don't offer closure. Offer ambiguity. Become quieter, more distracted, more busy. Let them wonder. 3. Soft goodbyes. Say things like, maybe we're just not meant to last. I need space to find myself. You deserve more than I can give. These aren't rejections. They're haunting maybes. And maybe is more powerful than never. The vanishing act. When to cut contact. After the fade comes the disappearance. But again, this must be orchestrated, not reactive. Leave a final message that's poetic, emotional, and vague. Disappear without blocking, insulting, or breaking down. Let them be the last one to reach out, and never reply. The absence must feel intentional, not angry, not cold, but untouchable, not bitter, but transcendent. They must believe you vanished because you are too deep, too complex, too unreachable for this world. They will grieve you as a myth, not a memory. The ghost echo technique. This advanced method allows you to disappear physically while remaining emotionally present in their psyche. How? Leave behind a song you used to play together. Write a message they'll read over and over again. Gift something symbolic, then vanish. Leave traces of your presence in their daily rituals. Example: you used to always light incense when they visited. Now, every time they smell it, they see you. That scent becomes a ghost. You're gone but never far. This is not departure, it's possession. What they do after you leave. If your exit is clean, quiet, and ambiguous enough, your absence will cause obsession. They think of you in loops, replaying final conversations. Self-blame. They believe they did something wrong to push you away. Romanticization. They remember only the highs, idealizing you. Delayed pursuit. They reach out weeks or months later, hoping you'll return. They may even start relationships just to replace you, only to realize no one stirs them like you did. You are no longer their partner. You've become their standard. Casanova's legacy, why he never stayed. Casanova didn't seduce by staying. He seduced by leaving too soon, right before the illusion faded. He knew the moment a love story began to settle into routine was the moment desire would die. So he vanished when he was still a dream, still a mystery, still a possibility. He left his lovers wanting, not closure, but another chapter that never came. That was his genius. That is the model of the eternal seducer. The danger of returning. The temptation to return is natural, but fatal. Returning answers the unspoken question. Returning gives closure. Returning replaces memory with reality, and reality is always messier, less magical. If you must return, do so with extreme caution. Briefly, distantly, mysteriously. Say less than you did before. Smile more. Leave again, quicker. Remind them that you were real, and remind them why they wish you weren't. Final thought. A clean break is mercy, but a haunting absence is power. You don't simply walk away, you leave an echo, a shadow, a pulse. You leave behind the version of yourself that could have been, might have been, almost was. And in that almost, they remain frozen. You're not forgotten. You're etched in the folds of their memory, in the background of every new lover, in the quiet hours when they wonder what they lost. You didn't say goodbye. You just vanished. And they are still listening for your return. Chapter 15. The Legacy of a Shadow Lover. Becoming irresistibly unforgettable. They remember the shadow more than the light. That is the final lesson. The true legacy of the dark lover. Not to be simply desired, but to become unforgettable. To be the echo in their silence, the scent in their memory, the burn they can't soothe. A shadow lover doesn't just seduce bodies, he stains souls. By now, you've mastered the techniques. You've studied seduction's dance, mirrored the subconscious, spoken in triggers, fed desire and starved validation. You've learned to manipulate time, distance, words, and even silence. But what separates the fleeting fantasy from the immortal imprint? The power of absence. Casanova knew when to disappear. An unforgettable lover isn't always present. He lingers by not lingering. The more you feed a fire, the more it burns through the wood. But starve it, and it becomes eternal, suspended in yearning. Use your absence as a weapon. Leave just enough of yourself behind. A phrase, a scent, a half-finished conversation, a night too short. Make them chase closure they'll never receive. You were a dream. Now you are the ghost of one. Remember, if they miss you, you still control them. Emotional fingerprints. Leave scars, not just memories. To be unforgettable is to leave behind emotional fingerprints. You must touch them in a way no one else dares. Ask what no one asks. Notice what no one sees. Validate what they hide from the world, and then vanish from it. Bury your essence in their secret self. Every human has an internal vault. Break in. Leave your signature, then disappear. But beware. Do not do this without discipline. A shadow lover never falls into the abyss he creates in others. The duality principle. Lover and phantom. You are the paradox, the one who sees them like no one else, yet remains unreachable. The source of their pleasure and their torment. You give warmth, then retreat into coldness. You open doors inside them, then leave them echoing in the hallway of their own desire. This duality, the constant tension between intimacy and withdrawal, is what makes you linger in their psyche. They can't classify you, they can't predict you, and humans obsess over what they can't understand. Make them addicted to themselves around you. The most powerful seduction is not making them love you. It's making them love the version of themselves that only exists when they are with you. You awaken the inner goddess or the primal beast. You coax out their hidden artist, their wounded child, their wild spirit. You are the mirror in which their secret self becomes beautiful. Take that mirror away, and they'll chase you, not because of who you are, but because of who they were when you reflected them. The final move. Let the legend grow without you. When it's time to vanish, vanish completely. Leave behind no explanations, no emotional cleanup, no apologies. Let the mystery ferment. Let them build myths in your absence. Let them romanticize the wreckage. Casanova wasn't remembered because he stayed. He was remembered because he left them wanting more. Always. Do not linger past your peak. Do not ruin your own legend. Closing thought. The eternal shadow. Being unforgettable is not about staying in their life. It's about staying in their mind. Rewinding in dreams, speaking through songs, returning in the pause before sleep. They will try to replace you. They will fail. Because they weren't addicted to you. They were addicted to the feeling you engineered, the alternate reality you created. And once touched by a shadow lover, reality feels unbearable. So go. Let the shadow fall long after you've gone. You were not meant to be loved. You were meant to be remembered. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with others who might find it helpful. Your support means everything and helps this channel grow and reach more people. And if you'd like to go even further in supporting the channel, consider joining as a member to get exclusive content and behind-the-scenes insights. Stay curious, stay powerful, and I'll see you in the next one.